Hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to make mods for Space Engineers. In this video I will run through the basic way of getting a model into the game using Blender with the Space Engineers Utilities add-on. In the video description you should find a link to the example planter mod. If you subscribe to that, go to the folder shown on screen, you should find this Blender file. Let's look at how we set up our scene. Here we have at the top our scene type. This is where we're going to have a main part, a subpart, whether our scene contains character models or is for a character animation or pose. Next, we have a toggle for linking subpart instances. So if this was a multi-part model, we can use this to visually show how our subparts will look in the main scene. Very handy tool when getting onto more complex models. Subtype Id. So this is likely to be the name of our block. The subtype is what differentiates each particular block of the same type from one another to prevent the game getting confused. So in this case, we have example planter as the subtype. It's going to copy it here. It's going to be in every one of these collection titles. And that's going to be the file name used by the utilities to output the MWM game files. Here we have grid scale, whether we're designing for large grid or small grid. Simple navigation automatically sets non-active collections to hidden. The notifications box, this will show the last 10 notifications from the utilities. That could be anything from errors to completed tasks. Recreate collections. So if one of your collections gets lost, broken, or deleted, we can use the Recreate Collections button to recreate that list. Got Create Collections, where you can have extra collections. So the standard is to have 3 build stages, but we could add 4 build stages. We could add 10 build stages. And this little button here is quite handy. It takes you to the modding reference page where you can read the tutorials and references that come with the utilities. Bounding box, quite straightforward. That provides a visual reference to the size of block that you're going to be making. If I choose my grid scale to be small grid, my bounding box becomes a small grid size, and I can use these toggles to change the size and color of that bounding box, as well as choose automatic to have the utilities choose an automatic size for me. I'm going to leave this as large, 1 by 1 by 1, mirroring mode. This allows you to visually see any mirrored states. So in this particular instance, this mirrored object would want to be this way around. Just invert that by 180 degrees. We can change these orientations so that they match how we would want the blocks to look when you're using the mirrored mode in game. You can also choose a mirroring model, which can be an alternate scene where you've specifically arranged a model to be used when mirroring. For instance, you would use this if you were doing wheels and you've got left and right hand wheels. Mount point mode. In this case, we've just got one small mount point. But default would be mount points on all sides that we could shape and scale to get the desired mounting points that we want for our block. If we need extra mounting points, we can simply select on the arrow, add area. Then we can change the mount point size, position, and that will become a mounting point in the game for attaching alternate parts to. You can set specific conditions for mount points, such as whether they're the default mount point or whether or not they're pressurized on open, which is a condition specific for doors. Icon render mode. This is quite a neat little inbuilt system into the utilities where you can very quickly create an icon for your block, and it tries to approximate the standard vanilla blue tint over the icon. But here you can choose to turn that off, and you can have that as a full color render if that's as you choose. Here you've got options for the render. such as if you want an alternate resolution, you want an alternate file format. The game will only accept PNGs and DDS format icons, and if there's an alternative folder you want to save the icon to. Here we have the export conditions. So here, if we had a file with multiple scenes in, we can export all the scenes at once, or we can just export the current scene. We can choose to delete the temporary files. When the utilities is making the MWM file, it creates a bunch of steps along the way, which with this checkbox ticked, we'll just clean up as it goes. However, if you're having trouble with exporting, you will want to untick this box so that you can read the log files and see at what point your model might not be completed. And here we have the option of to export an SBC file. This is the QBlocks definition. And this will just create a file which will allow you to very quickly get your model tested in game. Here we have the export size. So here we have large. Separate from grid scale, we have the export scale. So I could also export to small grid. And what that will do is we'll resize the file. So we have a large grid block, which is 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters, and then rescale that by the factor so that we have the equivalent size small grid block. Here we have the folder to export the model to. This has to start with models, but can have any reference after that. So if you're building a block pack with multiple different blocks, you can have additional folders with which you might want to arrange and organize your files. Now this last box is to do with importing. So I'm going to very quickly show you how to import game file. So here I'm going to import the alien leaf tree. So that's quite a bit big for my uses, so I'm just going to scale it down a bit. And I'm actually going to get rid of our Earth-like tree. Move this a little bit more into the planter. There we go. We have a variant on our planter. There are two options for import. You can import a single FBX file and remap the materials, or you can provide a complete import. This will attempt to import every part of that model from the SDK, including its LODs, build states, and everything, and populate every collection with the files that it finds. Sometimes when you import an FBX into Blender, its positioning will be a little bit off. This is a limitation in Blender with how it communicates with FBX formats, but one of the things you can do is you can select the top level object. So in this case, it's the assembler outline, and use this button to attempt to fix the positioning. Most of the time it works, and here you have the assembler all lined up again before you can make any modifications that you wanted to make. And then if you have to re-add the materials, we can use this remap materials button, and there we go. Now back to our example plant. Here we have the collections on the side here. Main collection. This is going to be the main visual model that you're going to see in game. Then we have the collision collection. So this is going to be whatever collision shape you want your object to have. So here I have a simple cube to take out the majority of the space. This piece of foliage is going to stick out the top, but that's going to be okay in this situation, as I don't really want to make the block any taller, but I want the tree to have the right sort of proportions. We have the level of detail models. There isn't any level of detail models in this particular instance. You don't have to have them, but obviously it does make the game run more efficiently if you have a complex model to have different levels of detail. Level of detail model 1 is what's used for anyone using medium level graphic settings. And then the other levels of detail are loaded in as a character gets further away from the object. The build stages, so be familiar with these in game. Build stage 1, stage 2, and build stage 3. That's going to be as you progressively increase the block. Here I have just the framework of the planter being made, and then obviously the final stage will be the full model. Build stages can also have a level of detail model. Again, this is so that you can reduce the detail of a model as the player gets further away from them. Now, with everything set up, I'm going to try and export this model. I've deliberately left this so that it would produce this error. This is a very common error. Cannot export collection main. It has more than one top-level unparented object. And this is quite important with Space Engineers, that the model has only one top-level object and that everything else is parented to that object. So here you have the alien leaf tree that I imported is a secondary parent object. So I'm just going to parent that, and then I should no longer get an error, and everything will export fine. And here we have the files that have been exported. So here we have the planter, the SBC file, build stage 1, build stage 2, and build stage 3. The SBC file is nothing more than a alternative file format XML. You can open it with any kind of notepad application, but I would recommend Visual Studio Code as it has some intelligence that you'll be able to use to problem solve any issues that you might find. So here we have the output that Blender has given us so that we might be able to use our planter file straight away. Type ID, so this is the block type. Well, right now we're just looking at a decorative block, so it's just a cube block. That subtype ID that we gave earlier. Display name, description. Icon, so this we can change this to the icon that we rendered out earlier. Cube size, so large as we've exported as a large. The size, so that bounding box size. Model offset, this will usually be 000 as long as you've built your model appropriately in game. As long as you built your model appropriately in Blender. The path to model, so here we just have model/example planter. The components that make it up, so here we just have a default of 10 steel plates. Critical component, so that'd be the component ID that makes your block functional. The mount points that we specified in Blender, and the build progress states that we've also built. So here we have build stage 1, build stage 2, build stage 3. And then the mirroring that we set in Blender. So here we have mirroring on the x-axis is y, mirroring on the y-axis is z. So all that confusion in mirroring is worked out for Blender for you. All the mount point sizes and everything is worked out using the utilities. To test our block in game, we're going to go to appdata/spaceengineers/mods. We're going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it example planter. And in there, we're going to create 2 more folders. One called data. And one called models. We're going to put this SBC file in data. And we're going to put these MWM files into models. Then we're going to run Space Engineers. Here we are in game. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the game options. And we're going to turn on experimental mode. This allows you to use mods. Get a little warning about instability. Then we're going to make a new game. Choose custom game. I like to choose Earth-like Planet because it gives you a bit of a grid that you can start on. To make it creative, it has to be offline if you're going to be testing mods. Autosave can sometimes be a good feature, but I'm going to turn it off. Then here we see different mods that you might be subscribed to on the Steam Workshop. But at the very top, with a picture of a house, you're going to see any local mods that you have. I'm going to add this example planter local mod. This isn't going to work for anybody else on an online game because it's local to you. Here we are in game. We've got our easy start base. And we're going to go to the G menu, and we're going to search for example planter. Here we have display name example planter, because we didn't set any of those fields. Drag it down to the G menu. And there we are. We've got our planter we can place. We can place it on the walls, ceiling. It's only got that one mount point, so it keeps snapping to that mount point. And then you can just test it out by making sure you can get close. Then we can have a look with a tool. And we can see that it has indeed 10 steel plates. Write it down, go through the build stages, and test to make sure you've got a fully functioning mod. In the next tutorial, I'm going to go through some more complicated settings and how we can get a mod that starts having functions. Until then, have fun.